Welcome to this month's edition of Up to Speed, Baker Tilly's automotive industry podcast. I am your host, Mike.mader, the dealership industry leader for Baker Tilly. On a monthly basis, Up to Speed serves as the automotive industry's connecting point to hear about conversations from industry leaders regarding topics that pertain to tax, accounting, and operations of retail dealerships. We arrive in your mailbox the third Wednesday of every month. Today, our conversation turns to the Department of Labor's wage and hour law change that relates to salary exemption rules that takes effect on July 1st. There are few better to talk to about labor law changes in the automotive industry than Tim Scott, an attorney and partner with the national law firm of Fisher Phillips. Tim is a core member of the firm's dealership practice group and provides practical, timely advice to dealerships across the country on issues surrounding compliance with various state and federal labor and employment laws. He's a frequent speaker and trainer on a variety of employment law topics, including wage and hourly compliance, medical leave and disability laws, and harassment and discrimination claim avoidance. He is an AV peer review rated by Martindale Hubel, and he has been listed in the Best Lawyers of America since 2012. He has also been listed in Chambers USA America's Leading Business Lawyers since 2013. We are honored to have with us today Tim Scott.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate getting the chance to work with you and participate in your Up to Speed program with Baker Tilly. I've had the privilege to represent and work with dealers for almost 25 years, pretty much across the country. And I've been the general labor counsel for the Louisiana auto dealers for almost 20 years now. So I really have enjoyed working with dealers to make sure that they're up to speed on all their compliance issues.
Well, Tim, it's great to have you with us today, and I thank you for being part of our program.
My pleasure.
So we've heard a lot about the regulatory changes issued by the Department of Labor related to the minimum salary threshold that's applicable to certain exempt employees. Can you give us a summary of what is changing and what isn't changing?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. You're correct. Really, the only thing that's going to change is that the minimum salary thresholds for certain exemptions under the Fair Labor Standards Act are going to go up. The purpose of this change, according to the Department of Labor, is to make it so more people are eligible for overtime. The idea behind that is the more people that are receiving overtime pay at time and a half, that will result in businesses wanting to hire more employees. And this will, in theory, reduce the amount of unemployment that we have. And so, as I mentioned, this only applies to certain exemptions. There's something called the white collar exemption. These are executive, administrative, and professional, those three categories. And when we say exemption, what we're talking about is being exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, the overtime, the record keeping, and the minimum wage requirements. So we always like to say that everybody at every employer is eligible for minimum wage, overtime, and record keeping unless they're specifically covered by an exemption. So with respect to these regulation changes, none of the substantive rules are changing, meaning that the definitions defining what the necessary duties are, those are the same. The fact that they have to be paid as salary, that's not changing either. The only thing that's changing is the minimum salary thresholds are going up. Currently, they're at about $36,000 a year. And effective July 1st of this year, they're going to go up to about $44,000. That's next month. And then they're going to increase again January 1st, 2025 to more than $58,000.
So we're going to end up getting a slew of questions in December again, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, most likely probably December is when you get to questions because that's a significant raise. The other thing that's going to impact is it has in it automatic 3-year increases in the minimum salary thresholds that are going to be based upon the federal wage data. And so really the bottom line is these thresholds, anybody that goes below these thresholds that you are treating as exempt is no longer going to be exempt, meaning all of a sudden they're going to be eligible for overtime pay.
Okay, so what impact are we going to see on our dealers? How is it going to affect them and changes that they're going to have to implement?
Well, the good news is that this is not going to have a significant impact on dealers certainly not as much as it's going to have on other employers. We're getting a lot of calls from nonprofits and schools and other types of retail establishments that have quite a few people making salaries that are below the threshold. The dealers that we've worked with so far, we're seeing maybe they might have one or two people that they have to make an adjustment for. Generally at a dealership, the folks that would qualify as administrative, executive, or professional would typically be the general manager, the department heads, such as the office manager, an HR manager or controller. Our experience has been folks that are working in those positions are already making more than the $58,000 that's going to go into effect in January. And the other part of it too is that there are some very helpful overtime exemptions that apply in federal law to most of your dealership employees, your sales employees, your service employees, your parts employees. None of that's changing. None of those have salary components to them. So it's really just your salaried management, your salaried administrative, your salaried professional workers that you need to look at.
Okay, so we're talking, I mean, in the dealership world, you're dealing with service advisors, finance managers. It probably isn't going to apply to those, correct?
That's correct. Yep. It's
Okay.
going to just apply to again, it's really the office managers. We've seen some BDC managers, people that are hiring and firing people. They've got responsibility. We just want to make sure that their salaries are at or above the minimum threshold.
Okay, now some of these, I know there's labor laws for federal, there's labor laws for state and some local stuff. So this is a federal labor law change. How is that going to have an effect on any state or local governing overtime exemptions?
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. This is just a federal change. It's not going to directly affect any state or local law. This is an area that really it makes it very hard for certain dealerships to comply. The rule is, state, federal, and local laws all apply to how you pay your employees. And you always need to comply with the one that's the most favorable to the employee. And so in certain states, you may have employees that are working next to each other, but depending on their hours worked or how they're being paid, one is getting overtime and the other is not, just because of the application of state versus federal law. And so dealerships or businesses that are working in California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, they need to make sure they're complying with both sets of laws. Some of those states like California already have minimum salary thresholds that are even above what we're talking about with these regulations. So it's really just making sure that you're complying with both sets of rules, but these changes are only going to impact the federal part of that.
Okay, so any state that has overtime exemption rules or laws already in place that are have a higher threshold than what the federal is, dealers don't really need to worry about it at this point.
That's correct. Now, most of the states, I will say, either do not have their own wage and hour laws, meaning that only the federal rules apply, or they have wage and hour laws that specifically incorporate by reference the federal rules. So in those states, just complying with the federal changes is going to be all you're going to need to do.
Okay, so I know there was a lot of controversy around this law and a lot of talking going on that there's a possibility that it might not go into effect, but we're sitting here in the middle of June and there hasn't been anything thus far that has said it's not going to go into effect. Is there a chance that they might not go into effect yet?
Yeah, there's always a chance. A lawsuit has been filed by some business groups in federal court in Texas. That's typically where these things are filed. They're asking for an injunction to prevent the rule from going forward. They've asked that they get a ruling before July 1st. I suspect that there will be some sort of a ruling on that before July 1st. It's anyone's guess as to how the court would rule. In the past, they did strike down some regulations that were put forward by President Obama, where they wanted to raise the salary to $47,000. And then under President Trump, they introduced some other regulations that raised it up to $36,000. Those were challenged, and that challenge lost. So it's really anyone's guess to see what's going to happen. if I had to speculate, my feeling would be I think the July 1 changes are probably going to go forward. I think it's a less of a likelihood that the January 1st and then that automatic 3-year increases are going to be allowed under the law.
Okay, so we need to kind of just stay tuned as to what's happening and keep an eye out for it. But chances are July 1 is going to happen, but maybe not before the end of the year.
Yeah,
The
I
end
mean,
of the year change, I should say.
Exactly. I had an old coach, and he used to say, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And so that's kind of what we need to do here. Just sort of stay tuned on what happens and be ready to make a change if you need to.
That could be challenging for dealers, especially or any business, but especially for dealers when they have pay plans set up in a certain way. And now they've got to modify or change those pay plans in anticipation of this law possibly coming through on July 1st. And it's hard to go back to somebody and say, hey, this law didn't change, so we're now going to change your pay plan back the way it was. So what are you advising your clients to do at this point to make sure that they ensure they comply with these new rules?
So right now we're really requesting and suggesting that our dealers examine their workforce, look at their payroll to see, do we have any employees that are going to be impacted by these changes? Do we have anybody that we're treating as exempt that makes a salary that's less than $44,000 or less than $58,000? And so once you know who those folks are, then you have some options. If you've got some folks that are making, let's say, a $50,000 salary, so you know that you're okay on July 1st, but you're going to have to make a decision effective January 1st, 2025, again, assuming the regulations go forward. You really have 3 options. One is to give them a raise when the changes go forward. That'll maintain them as exempt. You don't have to pay them overtime. But just understand that, every 3 years, you're going to probably have to give them a raise as well to make sure that you maintain that relationship. The other alternative would be to change them to non-exempt, so they get overtime. You'd have to start recording their hours. You'd have to ask yourself, okay, how do we determine what the hourly rate is? Do we divide their salary by 40? Are they working more than 40? Do we divide it by the number of hours they've been working? You've got some morale issues. I can tell you most folks that are exempt like being exempt. They like the ability to sort of come in late, work late. They don't like the idea of having to punch a clock every day. We've seen a lot of challenges, even when faced with a regulatory requirement of converting people over. And then you also should be looking at, are they working overtime? If you've got somebody that never works overtime, you can continue to pay them a salary, and you just need to make sure that you're recording their hours. So in the off times where they do work overtime, you can pay them the extra amount of work. Other companies have developed policies and programs where they restrict overtime work and tell people you can't work overtime unless specifically authorized to do so. The advice we give on that is, if somebody violates that rule, you still have to pay them, but you can treat it as a disciplinary issue. And then the third option is to check, and really this is something you need to work with your legal counsel on, but check to see if there are any other exemptions that might be available that might cover the person. So you may be treating them as exempt as an executive, but there may be another exemption that could apply. For example, let's say you have a BDC manager who you're paying a $40,000 salary to, and also commissions. If you didn't want to raise that salary for the BDC manager, you could look at that pay plan and adjust it in a way where the commissions make up more than 50% of their pay. There's a specific exemption that applies to retail establishments, which most dealerships qualify for, that apply to commission paid employees. And so the main rule there is that their total comp has to be comprised of more than 50% of commissions. And so lots of times there's ways to be creative and to avoid having to pay somebody overtime. I think overtime at dealerships sort of is inconsistent. Most people at dealerships are paid based on their production. And some dealers have had experiences where they have to pay overtime to people that people slow down and how they're working, and they're not as productive because their comp isn't tied to that. The other thing we're saying, let's say you look at your payroll and there are no changes you need to make. we still think it's a good idea to take this opportunity to look at your compliance with wage and hour laws, federal and state and local. If there's a change you need to make, lots of times, and we see this with big dealership groups, small dealership groups, there's always going to be one or two people that may not be exempt that you're treating as exempt. We've seen changes being made to pay plans over time because you want to entice somebody, or you want to reward somebody, and that might bring you out of the overtime exemptions. And so fixing these issues now kind of gives you some cover where you could sit down and say, okay, we've been making this mistake regarding these employees. We're going to change it going forward. And we could say to them, listen, we've been trying to look at our compliance with respect to these new regulations coming forward. We've decided to change your pay this way. Here's your new pay plan. That minimizes the amount of red flags that go up. When you have red flags, you have people that are going online, researching their rights, going to lawyers, that sort of thing. And if you were just to convert somebody and just say, okay, you're going to start getting overtime now, a reasonable question they're going to have is, hey, well, what about the past 3 years? What about the past 10 years, whatever it is? And so, my feeling is fixing the problem and moving forward is the most important thing. Minimizing red flags is also important, because in this legal climate, there are a lot of lawyers that have made a lot of money suing employers based upon even well-intentioned mistakes regarding how somebody's paid.
Well, I can tell you, Tim, I'm glad we've got you on our side, on the dealer side. You understand the dealership industry as well as understanding all these laws, because they can be pretty complex. So is there anything else that dealers should be doing now with respect to the pay issues beyond what is set forth in these regulations?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we're recommending is, while you're looking at people's pay, let's look at their pay plans as well. Pay plans are not always as clear as they need to be. We've seen a marked increase in litigation brought by employees or groups of employees regarding pay plans that weren't written correctly or weren't written at all. And so what we're advising people to do is, as they're going through their compliance test or check regarding the new regulations, make sure you've got pay plans. Number one, make sure that they're written. Make sure that they're signed by both the employee and the dealership. If you make changes, make sure those are signed by the employee and the dealership. These are a contract. They really are a contract. Even though employees are employed at will, how you pay them is still a contract. And so, like anything else, a dealer has a set specific contract that they use when they sell a vehicle or lease a vehicle that has all the protections in there that the dealership needs. You really need to be looking at your pay plans the same way. Defining terms like gross profit and commissionable gross or PACs, that's really important. Identifying and delineating what compensation, what income is part of their pay and what's not part of their pay is important. We always advise, if you can, to specifically tie your pay plan to specific lines in a monthly financial statement or internal reports that you're using. That way there's no discrepancy or there's no ambiguity in terms of what you've agreed to pay them. Please, at the end of the day, the advice we give is when employees are surprised or if they're confused about how they're being paid, that's when they go to lawyers. That's when they go to the government. Mm-hmm. If you've got a very clear and set understanding that they've agreed to, there's generally not going to be any issues or any problems.
Yeah. So I don't know what your experience has been, but we've been seeing that dealers have been getting, the old adage, keep it simple, stupid, have been getting better at keeping the pay plans more simplistic than in the past. They used to be crazy. You have to run 20 numbers off a financial statement, and based on unit sales, based on the gross that's generated, or based on the number of ROs sold. There were so many different ways of calculating a pay plan that complexity was crazy. But we've been seeing that they're starting to get a little better at maintaining more simplistic pay plans. Are you seeing that or not?
Yes and no. I'm seeing that pay plans, I think COVID changed a lot. Yes. And I think the way dealers approached pay plans during COVID, we'd focused more on the commissionable gross, and that was a big part of it. Probably less on CSI, less on some of these other unit bonuses, because you didn't have the units to sell. And so a lot of dealerships changed their pay plans to reflect what was going on during COVID. Now that inventories are starting to increase, now that dealers are looking to make sure that their salespeople are actually selling and doing all the things they need to do to follow up on leads and work with their customers, we're starting to see them add more bonuses and incentive pay to kind of come up with some creative ways to get the employees to do what they need them to do. So again, that's all well and good, but you just want to make sure that that's written. It's better to have it all in one place. I've seen some dealers that will have just a little grid for their commissions, but then they have bonus plans that are located in 3 or 4 different places, and the employees aren't signing the bonuses. It is better to have it all in one place, and that way when you change it, you know exactly what was there before, and you know what exactly is going to go forward with it.
Great point. So, Tim, thank you so much for being on the program today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I'm honored to have you here, and thank you for joining me.
Mike, I appreciate it. It's been great.
So thanks again to my guest, Tim Scott, partner at Fisher Phillips, and thanks for listening to Up to Speed. We will be in your mailbox next month with another interesting discussion pertaining to the retail automotive industry. Email me with suggestions for future topics at Michael.mader@bakertilly.com, or go to our website at www.bakertilly.com/dealerships, where you can also listen to past episodes of Up to Speed. Thanks again for listening to this program. We'll see you next time.